Do you have a poem you would like to read that maybe reflects an influence?
Sure. Well, one of my poets I admire is Anna Akhmatova, the Russian poet who grew up in Tsarist Russia, and she was like, I don't know, teenager or early 20s when the revolution broke out, and her whole social status changed from being a very high up in the hierarchy to someone who's really being watched carefully by the authorities. And her husband was gunned down in the streets by the Bolsheviks, and she just and then her son was arrested and detained in various prisons, and she would wait outside for like days and weeks at a time in the Russian winter, waiting for some word of her son, and there wasn't any coming. And she wrote a poem about that. This is the intro to that poem. She's described standing outside the prison, and she said, "In the dreadful years of the Yezhov terror, I spent 17 months in prison queues in Leningrad. One day someone identified me. Then a woman standing behind me, blue with cold, who of course had never heard my name, woke from that trance characteristic of all of us and asked in my ear, there everyone spoke in whispers, 'Ah, can you describe this?' And I said, 'I can.' Then something like a tormented smile passed over what had once been her face." So this is sort of my version of that event. Akhmatova at the gates. I wait. Pigeons at my ankles peck at stone. Winter angels of the Neva. Am I the last of our kind to dream of your face? My feet hurt. I lean exhausted up against the walls, ashamed how much I need them. My agony would summon you like it does this poem. I am hardly who I was. I need 1,000 names for cruelty just to make it through a day. Here, where everyone whispers, I keep my face the same as all the others. How to describe all this? An icon, perhaps. Me in a thin gray coat, long lines outside the Lubyanka, guards, deep cell, night chill, you. I burn, whatever comes to hand for warmth. Nothing left of me but body, inexplicable rising heat, sucking lungs, stream of breath, apparition in the smack of the cold, here, gone. I shift from one foot to another, shiver in the pigeon gray light. I endure. I describe it all, agony and breath, form and dissolution. I cannot free you. Forgive me.
Well, that's a great example of putting yourself right inside the character. I personally would find that very difficult to do.
It's a gift. It's a gift of a moment. I think I can't do it. I can't just say, "Well, I'm going to do this," But for some reason, I was reading a lot of her poetry then, and that event just stood out for me.
There are some poems that just happen to you.
Yeah.
And
Most of mine are that way. I'm not very prolific. I don't write a whole bunch of stuff, but when it comes, I want it to be real. I want it to be like that. Yeah.
Now, how much revision do you usually do with your poems?
Well, I used to take a line from William Stafford's work, where he wrote one poem a day for 30 years. So you do the math on that, and he gets a pretty astronomical number. But he said, so he was asked about, do you revise? He says, well, I put it on the refrigerator and during the day, and maybe if I see a line I want to change, I change it, but that's it, And I did that for a while. But lately, I've been finding that it's not so much revision as living with a poem. I've taken to memorizing one poem a month. That's what I've started to do, and I find that in the process of, and so if I'm standing in line at a supermarket or if I'm walking to the library, I'm just sort of running those poems, What I find is that as I do that over and over again, the poems themselves want to change. You know, that there's
They do, don't they?
they do, yeah. And sometimes I get really interesting lines, or something that article just isn't quite right. As I'm talking, it's always bothered me, but I've never really been aware of it before. But now, on the 30th recitation, you know, to myself, that inkling that I had becomes clear. You know, so I go home and I change it.
So these, this is a type of thing that's more in your head than if you actually look at the paper.
Yes. I don't have any paper. It's just me walking along the street or doing whatever I'm doing, riding in the car sometimes.
But a line that bothers you, you might not pick up on it as much just by looking in the paper.
That's right.
Than of you thinking of it, you know, when you're trying to memorize.
Yeah, because by memorization or repetition, the poem sort of sinks into me deeper, you know, and my reactions to various parts of it become stronger, more clear.
Mm-hmm. What do you look for in your own work? Are there certain things that you strive to do? When do you say, oh, this poem is exactly what I want or close to what I want?
I don't have anything specific that I'm looking for. In fact, when I start writing, I don't try to write a poem. The poem usually emerges out of like a journal type of writing. I want the poem to be true. I want the poem to reflect the truth of life as I experience it, and it can be funny, it can be sad, it can be short, it can be long. You know, I don't really care about those things. The emotional truth, I think, is my primary, and I try to keep that uppermost in my mind when I'm revising, when I'm reciting, when I'm writing, you know, when I'm performing. That's all. And I think that the reason part of that for that is I started writing in response to my wife's death, and it's always been a kind of a sacred activity to me. It's not something that I do for money, although I don't begrudge anybody who does, you know, because people have to make livings. But for me, that's not the way I want to do it. You know, I want to maintain the sacredness of poetry, and I don't have to. I have a day job that's fine, you know, that I don't mind. It pays enough, you know, and so I just take the freedom that offers me. You know.
And speaking of your day job, you are a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
What do you teach?
I teach business strategy and policy, or how large organizations make obscene amounts of money. That's my specialty.
Quite a specialty for a poet.
Yeah, and it doesn't do me any good because I only know the theory, and it's always it's not. Theory is only a faint resemblance to what really goes on.
So your teaching experience doesn't cross into your art.
Actually, it does, because of some teachers that I have or I have had. The memory of them is just very fond, you know, and sometimes my PhD advisor was a real strong character, and he won like a lifetime achievement award at this conference, and I was starting a big project that I didn't know if I could finish. I was very unsure of it, and I needed like an irrational belief in myself, you know. And if anybody had it, he did, you know. And so he started coming into my mind as I was writing, and when I was done, I had this poem to him. So I asked people if I should read it at the conference, and they said, "Oh yeah, you absolutely should." I said, "Well, should I ask his permission before I read it?" And they said, "Oh, don't do that. If you ask his permission, he'll say no, you know." So I did, and he loved it. And it was really a nice bonding experience between the two of us.
So, how long have you been out there reading?
I think about 23 years, maybe, something like that.